Join us on a journey toward a freer world through sound economic policy and a love for individual freedom. Welcome to Free the World.
Hello, everyone. Welcome from beautiful Northern Virginia here. My name is Wolf von Laer, and I'm the CEO of Students for Liberty. And today's episode, we will feature none other than Alex Gladstein, who is an expert about everything regarding human rights, but also an expert about Bitcoin. He has written a few books about the topic, like the Little Bitcoin book, Check Your Financial Privilege, and also The Hidden Repression, how the IMF and the World Bank sell exploitation as development. And this is really fantastic for us to talk about, especially since I'm seeing here in the chat that a lot of people come from around the world here. People from Greece here, we have people from Burundi, British Columbia, Burkina Faso, a lot of people from Africa. And there is, of course, issues regarding inflation all around the world. And Bitcoin is supposed to be a solution to that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Please forgive me if I sound a little bit rough. I'm still recovering a little bit from COVID, but that's not holding me back to talk about one of the biggest financial innovations in the last century, which I definitely think Bitcoin is. So now help me to welcome Alex Gladstein to this webinar. Alex, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm great. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So Alex, you've been studying Bitcoin very thoroughly for many, many years, and you've looked also on a lot of the original source material. Now, maybe most people in the chat know a little bit about Bitcoin, and I would love for you if you could put in the chat, if you don't know much about Bitcoin, just put a 1 in the chat, and if you have a good understanding of Bitcoin, put a 2 in the chat so that we can gauge a little bit the knowledge of the audience. So just put that in the chat right now while Alex and I are talking.
Wow. No one stops learning about Bitcoin, so...
There are not many experts, and like there's
we're all students. We're all students. It's okay.
And so, so you've read a lot of the original source material by the person or the group of people that have created Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto. We don't know who that person is. There's a lot of speculation about that. But can you tell us a little bit?
Anyone could be Satoshi Nakamoto except for Craig Wright, who is legally not Satoshi Nakamoto. It's really funny. There's these T-shirts that say, "We are all Satoshi," inspired by the idea that it could be anybody, but we're all Satoshi except for Craig Wright, which is very important. So just wanted to put that in there.
So that's a little bit of inside baseball. So give a little bit more of color, like who Craig Wright is and why that needs to be stressed.
No, it's important because for many, many years there was this Australian computer scientist, if you want to call him that, who fraudulently claimed to be the creator, even though if you watched him for 5 seconds speak, you'd know immediately he's not the creator of Bitcoin. None of the way he speaks or writes aligns with anything that Satoshi, whoever they are or were, ever published. But, he did manage to fool a lot of people, unfortunately, especially in different parts of the world. And what was sad is he was quite petty. And he ended up creating a fork of Bitcoin and trying to convince people that it was the real Bitcoin. But the market is what knows. The Bitcoin is a free market phenomenon. So what was interesting is Craig Wright created this coin, which ended up in the end being BSV. And, it's like something like, I don't know. I don't even know if it's $100 today. It might be less. And Bitcoin's whatever, $64,000. So the market will tell you what's real and what's not, which is a really nice thing. But the point is, there are many people who've fraudulently claimed to be the creator. Craig, unfortunately, was involved in suing open source developers to try and, attack them or pressure them if they called him out on not being Satoshi. So thankfully, Jack Dorsey and a whole bunch of other people like Alex Morkos got together and put together a legal fund, and they took this guy to court and they won. And Craig Wright now on his social media accounts has to have pinned to the top of his thing saying a statement saying I'm not Satoshi, which is just beautiful. So that was like a 10-year saga almost over now, which is really nice, but it just underscores that we don't know who Satoshi is. We know a lot about the people who did the work if that's what you're getting at, to get to Bitcoin. But we don't know who exactly, was the one who finally put it all together.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and that makes sense. So, but what do we know about Satoshi's motivation? He has done a lot of writing in different forums and so forth, and it's now published in ways. And we do know that in the origin block, like the very first block that was mined as part of the Bitcoin blockchain, he put in like this very famous newspaper headline, and which indicated it was about a financial recession, and that Bitcoin was as an antidote towards that. That's a little bit more about what do we know about his motivations for.
Yeah, there's a really good book. I have it here. If anyone's interested in the prehistory of Bitcoin, I would recommend you read this. This is called the Genesis book. It's by Aaron Van Werdum. He's a historian and a writer. It's interesting. He begins the book with this great quote that I think all of you will appreciate. It says, I don't believe that we shall ever have a good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of government. Since we can't take them violently out of the hands of government, all we can do is by some sly roundabout way introduce something they can't stop. So that's from Friedrich Hayek in 1984. And that's kind of the sort of the idea behind Bitcoin is creating a sly roundabout way that governments can't stop of us creating private sector money, essentially. Private sector money isn't exactly accurate because it's almost this public good thing, because it's not like there's a board or a small group of people that own it. It's not a private enterprise. It really is truly open to everybody on Earth. So it's almost more like a public thing. But when I say private, I just mean not owned by a government, if you get my drift. So it's sort of in the middle there somewhere. But the point is that there's an enormous amount of prehistory that went into Bitcoin. Back when Hayek said that, he didn't probably know about any of this, but essentially it began with privacy. It began with the fight for privacy on the internet, which began in the 1970s, began in research labs and university campuses with people trying to come up with ways to stay private and have private communications in the digital world. There were some major advances made in the late 70s that led to the rise of public key cryptography, which was finally implemented in the late 80s in a retail sense, meaning for individuals on the market, anyone here, in something called PGP, pretty good privacy, which was a protocol developed by Phil Zimmerman and a few other people, which allowed finally two computer users to trade a secret on the internet. And, certain things could leak about that communication, what we call metadata, but they couldn't, not even the FBI or NSA or Chinese government or whomever could know what was actually said without having the private key to decrypt. And that remains true today. So essentially, you had a group of activists on the internet called Cypherpunks who were inspired by this initial mission to create privacy on the internet, because what they saw is that basically the world was going to become completely digitized and surveilled. And they saw this in the 80s. They knew this was coming. And, part of Satoshi's lineage intellectually was these sort of privacy-minded cypherpunks. One of the most famous of them was David Chaum, who was a student and a scholar at Berkeley in the early 80s. He ended up creating something called blind signatures, which were a way to do digital cash on the internet. When I say digital cash, I mean, think about the features of cash. Cash is a bearer asset that you can trade around it's very hard to track. It doesn't have, an easy button to press for a law enforcement authority to see where the money's going. Cash is quite private. The idea was to create that on the internet to fight the idea of 1984 and, all-seeing surveillance. David Chaum tried to create this through a corporate entity called DigiCash. You can read about it. There's some great Wired magazine pieces on this in the early 90s, mid 90s. It didn't work out. So what ended up happening is these cypherpunks started to realize that private communications wasn't sufficient. I mean, it was part of the struggle, and they really had succeeded on that. They even succeeded normalizing it in America, at least. There are still many countries around the world that ban encryption, but in America, it's been normalized. And this was done through something called the crypto wars in the early 90s. So basically, what you had was civil libertarians, businesses, activist movements, academics, all pushing back against the Clinton administration and Senator Biden at the time, actually, who wanted to ban privacy on the internet. So you can go check this out. Rebels with a cause. I mean, these were people who really believed that we needed privacy and that privacy was an American right, and I think that's true. If you go way back and you look at, for example, the creation of the postal service in the revolutionary times was all about creating ways for Americans to communicate without the British spying on us. So, that was done in an imperial context. Today, we have a different sort of imperial structure to think about. But the point is that you had this lineage of people who were very concerned about privacy on the internet. And that's a lot of what went into what Satoshi was thinking about. But then there was another piece to it. So, privacy is something that is now been normalized, but very much was taken up by like sort of left libertarians back in the day, um, and even lefties, generally speaking, who were just sort of progressives or even Marxists or whatever. The point is that there were a lot of people on the left who were very, very into privacy. There was a really key piece, though, that Satoshi realized, and that's buried in the Genesis block, which is that if you're going to create digital cash, it can't just be focused on privacy. It has to be sound money, hard money. This is really important. And it wasn't until like sort of the late 90s that people started to figure this out. And there weren't that many people who had figured it out. I mean, largely the quest for digital cash remained very focused on just sort of private transactions. Nick Szabo, Wei Dai, Hal Finney, these were all key cypherpunks who made important contributions intellectually to the discourse in the late 90s, early 2000s that would sort of hint at the idea that you would need a decentralized mint or a decentralized issuance of the currency, meaning the issuance of the currency would have to be beyond government control. There could be no opportunity for inflation. And that's really what would make it special and hard and strong enough to build private transactions on top of. And this is what all the people who, I think, in my opinion, all the people who made Zcash or Monero or all these other privacy coins that they're missing is if you're trying to build a base layer for humanity for decades, for hundreds of years, for centuries potentially, it has to be hard. The foundation has to be hard, sound money that's predictable. And then you can build on top to achieve better privacy. But at that bottom layer, what people like Satoshi realized is you needed auditability and you needed a way for people to verify that there was only a certain amount of money in the system. So the brilliant sort of masterstroke of Satoshi was marrying this sort of cypherpunk kind of left libertarian endeavor to have digital cash with the basically idea of sound money. And that's the masterstroke of Bitcoin. So if you look in the Genesis block per your comment, Wolf, you will find not necessarily something about privacy. No. It's actually about the great financial crisis. So and again, that's the hint that this is about something a little more than just privacy. Another really important kind of Easter egg in Bitcoin history is the birthday of Satoshi. So again, we don't know who they are, but they chose for their identity back then on the message boards, April 5th, 1975, I believe. Maybe it was 73. Either way, it's April 5th. And April 5th is very important because April 5th is the day that FDR signed Executive Order 6102. So this was the order that was part of a larger arbitrary executive emergency act series that made holding gold illegal in the United States and that confiscated gold from Americans and American businesses and banks. And, basically FDR used all that gold to pay for the New Deal. And the dollar was devalued massively. So you can go look this up. But, gold was illegal essentially to hold for American individuals for almost 40 years. So through the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, through all of this inflationary time, Americans, didn't have any other it was very hard to find a good store value. Finally, in the 70s, which is the year Satoshi chooses for their birth year, Congress basically made it possible for Americans to hold gold again, in a private setting with no sort of, illegal ramification type stuff. So that was really interesting. So again, yes, of course, it's like built on all this cypherpunk activism, but it's also very important to note that a large part of what animated the idea behind Bitcoin was creating, a monetary system and an issuance that couldn't be controlled. So that's sort of the two parts of Bitcoin prehistory you have the marriage of digital gold and digital cash together. That's key.
That was fascinating. So several highlights there is the focus really on privacy, and then also making sure that the money is robust and is something that cannot be undermined. And there have been many different projects before Bitcoin that tried to get at that. You mentioned like Digitash. There was also like a digital gold attempt there by other folks. Many
Yeah,
different.
and they all got in trouble. They either all went bankrupt or got in trouble. And the crazy part is after 9/11, AML KYC regulations made it very hard for you to run like a regulated business and have private money for your individuals, meaning stuff that couldn't be spied on for, counterterrorism purposes. I mean, there was a world where Tron succeeded and DigiCash was sold to Microsoft and every single other web platform and bank in the mid 90s. And there's a world where we all live in an e-cash world. That world could have happened. And it would have been a very different world because people would have been normalized to the idea of at least, sort of retail transactions being completely private on the internet. That could have happened. It didn't. And now we're stuck. Now we're stuck in this panopticon. So, and again, the key part about what Satoshi and the Bitcoiners who've been building Bitcoin ever since realized was that you can't take any shortcuts on auditability and sound money. Privacy is impossible to achieve perfectly. Always, it's always like an aspirational goal. So we're always working on it, but it's never something you should make like the top priority, because then you'll ruin the pristine nature of the money itself. This is really important, and it's what distinguishes basically the Bitcoin community from all these privacy coins on the internet. I mean, these privacy coins are all going to die. They're all going to go to zero because they're focused scientifically on trying to be private as opposed to trying to be good money. And that's what cryptocurrencies are. They're money. So if you're bad money and you have inflation bugs, or people can't trust what the issuance is going to be in 10 years, or they don't think it's going to be valuable in 10 years, or they don't know what the monetary policy is going to be, forget about it. I mean, you might have an interesting short-term Band-Aid solution, fine, but it's not going to be around in 2030. None of these privacy coins are. So we're talking about kind of a global peaceful Manhattan Project style idea of bringing the best and brightest together to create money for future generations. And it's very important that the monetary issuance piece be at the bedrock of that, and then we can build scalability, we can build privacy on top. This is sort of really, really key.
So now it's very clear that you have dedicated your last few years, and maybe like even like longer than that, half a decade, more than a decade, studying Bitcoin very much in depth. So you firmly believe in this technology, and that has the potential to bring about changes in lives all across the world, especially also for human rights activists. So what would be your elevator pitch for why somebody should pay attention to Bitcoin and why it matters?
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends on who I'm talking to. Usually I'm talking to human rights activists, so it's pretty easy. Bitcoin is money that dictators can't stop. Period. That's it. That's the elevator pitch. If you want money that dictators can't stop, learn how to use Bitcoin. They can't, if you use it the right way, they can't censor it. They can't demonetize it. They can't debase it. It's very hard for them to sort of have a micro understanding of where it's going and who's using it if you use it the right way. This is very exciting for human rights activism, because basically dictators have over the last, and all governments, honestly, but especially authoritarian ones over the last few decades, have built a new tool in their arsenal of repression, and that's financial repression. So when there's an organization now opposing a particular government in 2024, this didn't happen in the 80s and 90s. We just didn't have a digital monetary landscape that was sort of advanced enough to be able to do this. But today, one of the first things they'll do is they'll freeze your bank account, or they'll freeze your ability to make payments or transactions. And that really sucks if you're like leading a protest or running a nonprofit or running some sort of organization in some country. If you can no longer pay your people and staff, like you've been sort of disabled. So that's like one of the first things a regime will do now. You can look everywhere: Nicaragua, Russia, Hong Kong. I mean, this is just a matter of course, is that governments go after the money, and they try to consolidate it. and they can't take your Bitcoin if you use it the right way. It's really powerful. So that's like one thing I'll say, but it depends on who I'm talking to. I mean, I might be talking to some investor type person, and that's obviously also very simple. Bitcoin's the best performing asset in the world since it was created, and it's going to be the best store of value and the best wage technology ever. Like, it's just going to be something that over time, um, not just preserves and protects, but improves the purchasing power of the people who use it. So that might be a different angle that you're interested in. You also might be interested in the electricity power implications of Bitcoin. So if you're building infrastructure in rural areas, it might be very interesting for you to know that Bitcoin is energy savings technology, and Bitcoin is technology that allows us to harness stranded or wasted power. That's a completely different discussion than some sort of cypherpunk privacy censorship resist. No. This is a totally different thing. And this is the idea that Bitcoin turns energy into capital anywhere. With all you need is internet, and this completely transforms the way that we're going to have infrastructure and electricity. So, Wolf, it really depends on who I'm talking to, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And some people also mentioned, like, hey, you don't have to go like that far, east, because you can also look at Canadian truckers. It's like a thing.
Yeah, or you
all
can
around
look
the
at
world.
WikiLeaks. I mean, that was kind of the first shot across, the bow in a way, in terms of large governments trying to disable critics through financial repression. And that was, done by democratic states, right? So, now it's like just sort of part and parcel of the authoritarian playbook, which is why activists in authoritarian countries really need to understand how to use Bitcoin properly. But yeah, so it depends who I'm talking to. But I think the money that dictators can't stop is a good one.
Very good point. And somebody else is questioning, like, oh, it's not controlled by anyone. That's the unique thing, really, about Bitcoin. There is no CEO of Bitcoin. We don't know who created it, and it cannot be stopped. I mean, one of the strongest things that happened within the last few years is that China banned Bitcoin. Right now, they are entertaining to reintroducing it, but they had most of the computing power that was protecting the network, called hashing power, within China. And from like one day to the other, they had to theoretically shut it all down, and Bitcoin just continued to go. It's really
we saw that.
very resilient.
I mean, there was a 100-year anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, and basically the communists they don't like Bitcoin. It's not harmonious. They can't control it. So we don't really know what happened. There's a lot of dispute. There's still some mining, a decent amount of mining in China, from what we can understand. But basically, it used to be like 70% mining in China. And that was because it's important to understand why. Why? Well, the Chinese government overbuilt hydropower capacity in its sort of south central region. So you had just enormous amounts of curtailed hydropower from industrial projects that were built for something in 5 or 10 years from now, where there was just a bunch of hydropower being generated from these enormous rivers during, part of the year, and no one to buy the power. So it's being curtailed and wasted. So some enterprising Chinese miners came and plugged in and made a deal with whatever power company or local official, and they mined Bitcoin there. And that's what was happening. It wasn't like some nefarious scheme. It was just the free market at work. Bitcoin is a technology that finds cheap energy, anywhere in the world. That's what it does. It finds cheap electricity and it goes to it. And it's really interesting because it'll short circuit governments that try to do sort of price controls and stuff like that on electricity. Like if you're living in a regime like Iran or Venezuela or something, where one of the last ditch efforts of the dictator or dictatorship is to provide free energy or cheap energy to its people, Bitcoin will get right in there, and it will get right in there, and it'll buy up all that free or cheap energy, and it'll sort of short circuit the plan for what you're trying to do, which I think is great. So it's interesting, but basically, I mean, you had the Chinese government say no thanks, and we saw. I mean, we could see it, we could verify it. That something like 2/3 of the hash rate, meaning of the electricity spent on the Bitcoin network, just disappear in the matter of days. Now, over time, it built back up, and now we're at like a crazy all-time high because there's mining all over the world now. It's become completely geopolitical now with mining. It's fascinating. Like the government of Paraguay is now basically they have this huge hydropower set up massive dam, and it's sort of some of the electricity is shared between Argentina and Brazil. And for a lot of years, the people in Paraguay had excess power and they were selling it to Brazil. And now they're selling a bunch of it to the Bitcoin network instead of Brazil. I mean, that's how sort of geopolitical things are getting. There's governments in the Middle East doing Bitcoin mining. There's obviously governments in Eastern Europe doing Bitcoin mining. It's getting heavy. The Ethiopians just had a big announcement about mining. The Bhutan government does a lot of mining. I mean, this is a small country, but usually start small. We're not sure, but the Salvadoran government appears to be mining. So we're talking about a bunch of different governments now that are mining, and obviously lots of companies in all different kinds of areas. So it just proves the kind of resilient nature of the beast,
And I mean, it's clear that the interest continues to grow about Bitcoin. I mean, you and I will be at a conference next week. They're expecting how many people? 24,000 or something along those lines. It's gonna be crazy.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'll say is that I know there were more than 10,000 people there last year, and I know there were like around 20,000 the year before. So it ranges in that range, but I think this year, given the prominence of some of the speakers, it'll be back up to probably close to 20 is my guess. And it's wild. I mean, it's like a Woodstock for this sort of really large umbrella idea of Bitcoin. And then like there's all kinds of people under the umbrella. It's really interesting. I think it's a fun, uniting, animating force. Like a lot of different people can agree that Bitcoin's cool and basically disagree about almost anything else. But if you're a Bitcoiner, you have like this connection with people. It's so cool. Like you can just go to Thailand or to any country and you can like go to a Bitcoin meetup and you can just have a beer or a drink with somebody and you have nothing in common at all, but you both like Bitcoin. So it's like, it makes this kind of really fun association with different people around the world. It's really beautiful. And it's part of the uniting force of this thing. Like this thing's a uniter. It brings people together. It forces collaboration. Forced collaboration is the way I would put it, which is really cool.
And one thing that, because we got like a lot of ones in the chat, and by the way, welcome everyone. We have over 200 people watching right now, and it's still going up, which is fantastic. So a lot of people have put a 1 in the chat, which means they didn't have like as much knowledge about Bitcoin right now. And everything that we're talking right now and about all of the impact and the network that's been created, the hashing power, all of that applies only to Bitcoin. Now, somebody's asking in the chat, Kendra, what is the difference between cryptocurrency and Bitcoin? Because both you and I, we make a clear distinction between that.
Yeah, I mean, look, so there are a lot of kinds of money in the world. Let's start super big picture, right? Most money in today's world is issued by the private sector. Most money is not printed by governments. That's something that people get confused about. Most money is issued by banks and financial corporations and tech companies like whatever, Visa or Apple or whatever. And most money, the way we think about it, is debt, is credit in today's world. Like, so, a bank doesn't necessarily have to like wait for you to deposit funds at it to create money. No, it can just make a loan and all of a sudden it's made an asset and a liability. So this idea that like customer deposits power the banking system may have been true at some time in the past. It's definitely not true today. So we live in a very sort of credit driven world. There's hundreds of trillions of dollars of credit and only a very small amount of what we would call collateral. So like if you actually looked at like the total amount of debt versus like real estate, gold, fine art, commodities, things that people own versus the credit superstructure on top of it, the collateral piece is pretty small. So that's one important thing to point out. Now, digitally, there are different kinds of money, right? So you have traditional fiat currency, which is sort of regulated by governments, but usually issued by private sector entities. This is the money most of you are all familiar with, whether you make you have a checking account or you make a PayPal payment or Venmo payment, or you're using Western Union or whatever. Like all of this is like government credits, right? Then you have stable coins, which are a new invention they are a cryptocurrency. And what stable coins are basically a less regulated version of government credits. So these are important. There are a lot of stable coins. There are more than $100 billion of stable coins issued around the world. And you know what? They have nothing really in common with Bitcoin other than that they're digital, but they are useful. I would caution people against owning too many stable coins because they can go to zero because they have a centralized issuer. Almost all of them do, for the most part. Most stable coins are issued by the company behind Tether, or the company behind USDC, Circle, or the company behind the Binance-powered stablecoin, meaning Binance. So a handful of coins make up almost all the stablecoin market. Stablecoins are interesting because they're basically US dollars you can have on your phone or your computer without ID. So someone in Lebanon or Argentina or Turkey who's facing a serious currency crisis, they can have access to the US dollar now. That's really interesting. And I've always argued that these are like humanitarian tools. I emphasize caution when sort of dealing with them because they are centralized, they can be censored, they can go to zero. So just be a little careful. But I guess in theory, any fiat currency could go to zero or be demonetized or frozen. So I don't know if they're like that much more risky than any other dollar asset. And at the end of the day, it's not like people in Lebanon or Argentina or Turkey or Egypt, have that many options to get dollar denominated credits of some kind that can hold purchasing power relatively well. So stable coins are like really important in this conversation, and they're very globally dominant. So I would say that's a type of cryptocurrency to keep your eye out on. Then there's this long tail of other cryptocurrencies that are basically, these are private money. These are private monies. These are currencies created by a company or a foundation and issued with some sort of, they're basically securities in a way. Like they're kind of like stocks is the way to sort of think about it. Now, some of them will argue, no, we're not stocks or securities, whatever. That's not really I don't care. The point is that they are like small pieces of some sort of collective endeavor. And most of them are outright scams or pyramid schemes. Like if you look at just the fact that there's probably 25,000 cryptocurrencies, it gets tough, but there are a handful which are not obvious scams or pyramid schemes, a handful. And, I would say the stable coins aren't scams and Bitcoin is not a scam. I'd have a hard time saying anything else is not a scam. But, just be careful out there. The point is I can say with certainty that 99.9999% of them are all scams. So just be careful. What they end up doing is they enrich the creators at the expense of the public. That's what they do. And this is why people like Wolf and I like to distinguish Bitcoin from crypto. Bitcoin is like a complete antithesis of what I've just described. Bitcoin was not created by a small company with a pre-mine to exploit the public. No, Bitcoin had no pre-mine. Satoshi had to spend electricity for all the Bitcoin they earned. There was no sort of like, moment where just like all this currency was invented into thin air, which is what happened with Ethereum and every single other cryptocurrency moving forward, pretty much. I mean, there are a couple other currencies that tried to have like a fair distribution, but they just haven't really done very well. And they constitute a tiny percentage of the overall market. If you put Bitcoin to the side and stablecoins to the side, I mean, the overall activity in this market is just so many scams and pyramid schemes. It's crazy. So I think it's important to distinguish, like, say, Bitcoin, stablecoins, and then crypto. Like these are 3 areas, and it's why like it's tough when someone's like, you see a lot of people signaling, oh, like crypto is good for America, or like we want to be pro crypto. I don't want to be pro crypto. No way. So I have to really distinguish myself. I'm not pro scam. I'm not pro FTX. If you say you're pro crypto, it means you're pro FTX. It means you're pro whatever kind of crazy shit he had in the back to be able to use these fake tokens he made up to orchestrate the scam on all of his depositors. I mean, that is crypto. Crypto is scams. That's what the history of cryptocurrency's been ever since the beginning, has been pre-mining a coin into existence and trying to dump it on the retail to get seniorage, basically. That's what crypto is. So I can't get down. I can't join this. Crypto is pro-American, pro-crypto. No, I'm pro-Bitcoin. I'm empathetic to stable coins. I'm not into cryptocurrency, and you shouldn't have to be. Like you can pick and choose. So I would always recommend when someone's like, "Oh yeah, I'm totally into crypto," like ask them intelligent questions. Which cryptos? What do you mean? Are you into Cardano? What about Shiba Inu? Oh, okay. What about Dogecoin? Is that what you're into? Like, you should actually ask them. Like, just because I like Bitcoin does not mean you need to assume I like Shiba Inu or Dogecoin or some insane scam like Cardano or Internet Computer Protocol or God knows what. These are not the same things. So cryptocurrency is a really broad term that, generally speaking, I would use to describe the 25,000 or whatever tokens that private entities have created, companies, individuals, foundations, and I would actually separate stablecoins as their own bucket. I think they deserve their own discussion. Now, some stablecoins have been scams outright. Others just seem to be good businesses. Like Tether seems to be just a very, very profitable business. Now, it has nothing really to do with Bitcoin, but it's a very profitable business. I mean, they accept deposits, they put them into U.S. Treasuries, they make 4 or 5%, and they make billions of dollars a quarter. And they're one of the most profitable companies in the world. And USDC is probably similar, because you don't pay interest out on the stable coins. It's pretty insane if you think about it. Like they are issuing stable coins that they don't have to pay interest on, and the deposits they take, whether it be dollars or Bitcoin or whatever, they're making 4 or 5% on. So the spread is crazy. So you can have a highly effective company if you do that. Now, State Street just said it's going to have a stable coin. So, all these companies are going to want stable coins. The reason why the stable coins are valuable, again, is they don't require ID to use. As soon as you sort of compromise that, they become not that interesting at all. Like that, there's no technological reason really why they're that interesting. It's regulatory arbitrage. It's because someone in Lebanon can use it. That's why it's interesting and valuable. Because someone in China can use it. I mean, let's be real. So that's why it's interesting for people. It gives them dollar exposure when they don't have the proper paperwork. That's why they're interesting, but they're very important. So this is kind of like, I would encourage you to think of these things as 3 camps: Bitcoin, stablecoins, crypto. And then within crypto, there's a million different differentiations of different tokens. And you can go explore that. Just be careful once you get out of the Bitcoin and stablecoin area, like be careful. I hope that's helpful. And maybe if everybody's a one, we could talk a little bit about like why Bitcoin's unique, but whatever you want to do, Wolf.
No, that's really, really helpful. And I would definitely encourage everyone, if you spend time on something, just learn about Bitcoin. Don't look into all the other things before you really try to understand like why Bitcoin is unique, because there's so many scams out there and it's really dangerous. So, don't get distracted. I've seen a few people.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add that it's very like if anyone has in their bio or their profile like blockchain or Web3 or crypto, massive red flag. Like if you're hiring someone, I mean, that's not a good sign. Not a good sign. It's just not a good sign. So just poke around, like look a little deeper into that. Usually it means this person doesn't know what they're talking about, because what do you mean Web3? Can you talk about that? A lot of smoke and mirrors. I mean, there are conceivably use cases for these things that aren't monetary. I mean, Bitcoin is a clock, a universal clock in a way. You can inscribe stuff into Bitcoin, which can definitely be valuable. I mean, look, Satoshi inscribed a very important political message into the Genesis block. I think there are limitations to inscriptions on Bitcoin, but they are certainly interesting. I would not call those a scam. So there's digital art, which can be inscribed into Bitcoin, which is something that's interesting to follow. Now, some of that can be a scam. A lot of it is, but that's something that I would say is certainly some sort of use case, is inscribing stuff into the chain. I don't know how useful, but certainly you can do stuff with timestamps and maybe elections. I don't know. I haven't seen enough to really have a strong feeling on that, but I know there's a few other use cases for these things that aren't monetary. I mean, obviously, as I mentioned, the mining stuff, and that's probably important to note, is that like basically by today, almost all of the mining, meaning, expending electricity in exchange for a chance to earn cryptocurrency, nearly 100% of that's Bitcoin today. And that's helpful because that additionally differentiates, right? So we're really talking about Bitcoin as proof of work, right? We're talking about this idea that there's no free lunch, right? Every other crypto has free lunch. Somebody got free lunch at the beginning and then, has been eating off of it ever since. The stablecoin people are getting free lunch. You're giving them money and then they're making interest and you're not. I mean, the entire Ethereum idea now, post proof of work, is based on some people getting free lunch and other people not getting free lunch. If you look into staking and what that is. So it's interesting, but at the end of the day, like, there is no free lunch in Bitcoin. It is quite a brutal, actually, thing. If you look at it carefully, it's not sparing or generous in that sense, but it's principled, and over time it will deliver strong returns and protection for the people who use it. But it's not a welfare program, and it's not a get rich quick scheme. It's a don't get poor scheme. That's really what Bitcoin is. That's what Jameson Lapis said. But anyway, I think that it's important to note that Bitcoin is different from all the other coins on the internet, including dollars and euros and stuff, because it requires proof of work. So that's very important. But yeah, in general, just be careful about the other stuff. It's different. It has different ethos. It has different construction. It has different people behind it. A lot of it's really shady. A lot of it goes to zero. Look into Terra Luna if you want. It is what it is. But I mean, I think one of the interesting reasons why Bitcoin works, which is worth dwelling on, is that it's powered. I mean, it's not really controlled by anybody. If it were controlled by somebody, it would be you. Like that's who it's really controlled by, is you, because people run the software. You choose to run the software. The upgrades are not auto upgrades. It's not like you're sitting on a computer and your computer's like, oh, time for the next upgrade to Mac, whatever. Or back in the day when it was like Windows next version, and if you didn't upgrade, it didn't work. That's sort of in software like a hard fork type thing. Like in Ethereum or all these other coins, it's like, oh, new version, like, and you can't like protest it. If you don't install that, you're done. Like you now have a different coin that's been forked off that's now worth zero or whatever. So Bitcoin's different. It doesn't have hard forks as a culture. The power is in the person, the individual. They run the software. They choose what to use. So you can take Bitcoin and fork it today and make a version that has 42 million coins instead of 21 million coins. I would encourage you to try and do it. Go ahead. The market's going to be like, no thanks. It's going to go to zero. There's like a million forks of Bitcoin. Bitcoin Rainbow, Bitcoin Diamond, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin ABC, Bitcoin SV, God knows what over the years. Bitcoin Speed, Bitcoin Slow, whatever. The point is, they all go to zero because the market knows what the real Bitcoin is. And it's very intelligent. And it might be the only free market in the whole world. I mean, it's really, really interesting because, again, the issuance. I mean, even Ethereum, which I know there's probably a lot of fans here of, I would just point out to you that we don't know what the monetary policy of this thing is. It changed many times. Now you can say, well, the people in charge know what they're doing. They keep tweaking it, and they're kind of like these awesome scientists, and they're going to figure out the right monetary issuance. Be a little cautious about that. I don't think so. I think it ends in inflation. It all ends in inflation. There's an ironclad rule of money. Anything that can be inflated will be inflated, period. So, you might have, oh, it's deflationary for whatever X reason now. Yeah, maybe. Not eventually, like, before it all collapses, there will be an inflationary period. This is just going to happen. Because if you look at the issuance and how it works with these coins, there aren't that many like ways you can, if you look at the math equation for the money, I mean, you can do taxes, which are not very popular. Like you can do taxes essentially, or you can make more currency. I mean, and people tend to, as you know, with governments, they tend to not want to tax, and instead they want to make more. So that extends into the crypto world as well. So you can watch. If you go to CoinMarketCap and you look at all these tokens, you can see the total supply or whatever. It's just astronomical amounts, and they keep changing, and who knows? Like Dogecoin, it was really funny. When Dogecoin was invented, it had a capped supply. And then at some point, because it was made as a joke to make fun of Bitcoin originally, and now it's this absurd, multi-billion-dollar joke. But at some point, the coders decided just to make it infinite supply as opposed to capped. These are the kind of monkey business that you get into with the other tokens. Like no one can just do that to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's ethos is 21 million. Like if that ever changes, then Bitcoin basically dies. Like the experiment's over. It's not like there's going to be, oh, we're all going to get together and decide to like change the amount of Bitcoin. No, that's not going to happen. So, yeah, I hope that helps without having to get into like code and sort of technical language, why Bitcoin's unique,
Yeah.
Because you control it basically, because the individual controls it. That's the huge difference.
Yeah, and that's really powerful for the audience to understand as well. And there's like a few questions that are hinting at that, and I'm curious about your opinion, because some of the audience here says like, hey, I'm from, South Asian country, I'm from Nepal, it's already banned here. Like, what is your opinion on that? They're asking you this, but like, this is also another question I want to tie in with this as well, Alex, is you've already evoked Executive Order 6102, which happened in 1933,
Yes.
where basically the US government, the president, not even the government, just the president said like, hey, you're not allowed to own gold anymore and you have to hand it over to the US government. Now, right now it looks like, governments become, at least in parts of the West, more friendly towards Bitcoin. The Republican National Convention basically put Bitcoin as part of their policy agenda and so forth. Now, if we, however, look at the future, right now the US is like $34 trillion in debt. And at some point, it will be even worse. And then they will look at people that have money, and that's most likely going to be then Bitcoiners, and they want to take it away from folks. And it's right now being banned already across the world. What makes you think that is not really a threat? Because right now, they can look at us and see who's owning Bitcoin.
It is a threat. It is a threat. So, look, I wrote a piece a few years ago for Quillette about, can governments stop Bitcoin? And the answer is no. Like they can't technically stop it. These ideas that they're going to like 51% attack the network are just science fiction. What they can do is they can hurt, and they can go after users of Bitcoin, and that's what they do. So, if Bitcoin is banned in Nepal, that's the Nepalese government coming out and saying, we don't like this thing, and if we find out that you're using it, we're going to fine you or jail you. Governments can do that. Now, that is going to backfire on them eventually. It's sort of like trying to have a country without the internet. Now, we don't quite see this yet because it's so early with Bitcoin. I mean, we are in like the second inning here with Bitcoin. People are like, oh, Bitcoin's over. You're never going to get like big returns. I mean, these people are full of it. They don't know what's going to happen over the next 20 years. We are so ridiculously early with Bitcoin. Most people have no idea what's going on. You're starting to see hints, right? Governments mining Bitcoin, governments making Bitcoin legal tender, the former president of the United States being pro-Bitcoin, like whatever, like governors in America being pro-Bitcoin, like massive corporations being pro-Bitcoin, like Wall Street being pro-Bitcoin. You can start to see that it's changing. And it's really funny because Russia, the other day, Putin is like freaked out because there's too much Bitcoin mining in Russia. If you had a time machine and you went 10 years in the future from 2014 and you were a Bitcoiner, and back then it was like, we don't know if this thing's going to work out. And you went 10 years in the future, and the headline was like Putin freaking out about Bitcoin mining in Russia. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I mean, we are on our way to Bitcoin being the global currency for the world, but we're very early. We're like second inning. There's like so much stuff that's going to happen here over the next few decades. But look, governments in this transitionary period will react. They will lash out. And especially authoritarian ones that have no checks and balances, a lot of them are just going to ban it, or they're going to ban unregulated use of it. Meaning, okay, if you want Bitcoin and you're in Nepal, what they might do is they say you can use this bank and you can deposit your money and you can own Bitcoin, but you can't actually withdraw it. That would be what they're going to try and do. Like they're going to make you hold what's essentially like an ETF or some kind of thing at a bank. Custodial Bitcoin. That's not real Bitcoin. That's just you giving your money to somebody for an IOU. Don't do that. So the whole point about Bitcoin is to be your own bank. So if you're in Nepal, I mean, you need to make your own decisions, but they can't stop you. they can't stop you. They can't stop you from getting Bitcoin, learning about it. You know, those are risks and decisions you have to make. But this is the cool part, is it's for everybody. I may not be for everyone right now, but it is for anyone. So I mean, that's the inspiring part. I could try to go through some of these quick questions,
Go for it.
Wolf, if that's okay. Yeah. So what's the difference between Bitcoin and NFTs? The main difference is that Bitcoin is scarce and people can make more NFTs. I mean, that's one difference. I mean, the other difference is that NFTs are supposed to be collectible art, that are, in the name, non-fungible. Like, it's supposed to be like, a baseball card on the blockchain, whatever. That's not currency. That's not money. Bitcoin's supposed to be fungible currency. You know, if you're like somebody who accepts Bitcoin for a service, you're not like inspecting my Bitcoin to see. No. You're just going to accept the Bitcoin. You don't care about what kind of Bitcoin it is. It's Bitcoin, so it's fungible for the most part. I mean, that's the idea. It's right there in the name. That's the main difference, is that it's fungible versus non-fungible. What is the blockchain? The creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi, never used the word blockchain. Blockchain was a marketing term that people came up with later. They used the word time chain. What they were referring to is the fact that it's kind of like amber, like on a tree with sap and a fly. Like, basically, you have transactions that are mined and added to this canonical history of transactions. And the longer time elapses, the harder thermodynamically it would be to go backwards. So, like, if you have a transaction from a couple of days ago, it's basically set in stone for life. It is, in theory, it's possible that, like, transactions within the last few hours, someone with a ton of mining power could, like, try to reorganize the blockchain, the time chain, whatever you want to call it, try and redo that transaction and maybe commit a double spend or a fraud. But it's very unlikely. It basically never happened. So the blockchain, what it's really referring to, is this chain of canonical transactions. Then it became a marketing term for a bunch of nonsense. The Binance cryptocurrency is good today. Well, it's as good as CZ. So CZ issues the Binance cryptocurrency. CZ is a very well-known Chinese Canadian entrepreneur, one of the richest people in the world. He's also under an investigation by, like, numerous governments, and he could be arrested. He's a central point of failure. So if something bad happens to Binance, yes, the Binance cryptocurrency is going to crash real hard. So you're buying a piece of a stock of a company that's being actively investigated by tons of intelligence agencies and that may be shut down any day. Like, be careful with that one. I would say that is definitely speculation. Bitcoin can face cybersecurity challenges. Absolutely. I mean, storing Bitcoin is difficult. Like, you want to start, it's a journey. You have to learn about how to store your Bitcoin properly. There's no perfect solution, but usually you want to start with a good hot, or what we call a mobile wallet. A hot wallet means something on a computer or a phone, maybe something like Blue Wallet. Learn how it works, like send a couple bucks of Bitcoin to it, delete it off your phone, and you're going to back up the Bitcoin wallet with a phrase when you install the wallet. Delete it completely and then reinstall it and put in the words, and you see your Bitcoin still there. That's a very important moment. So play with it. I mean, it's an adventure. Bitcoin doesn't function everywhere in every country. Yes, it does. It doesn't know what nation you're in. Has no clue. It really has no idea. How does it work? Well, that's a complicated answer. So suffice it to say, again, it's money that governments can't stop. So that's really what you need to know to start your adventure here. How can you use it? Well, I mean, you can download a wallet. You can earn it, which is the best way. You can mine it, which is complicated. You can buy it. Buy it with cash. You can buy it online on a P2P exchange. You could use KYC and buy it on a website like Cash App or Binance. I mean, there's many ways to use it, but using it is the main use case of Bitcoin is to save. It's to store value. There are other amazing use cases that relate to commerce, doing business internationally, freedom, money of activism that can't be frozen, and even power. Again, to use Bitcoin to stop wasting energy at a hydro plant, for example. It's not about profit, it's about truth and principles. Well, actually, it's both. And that's why Bitcoin works so well. It marries self-interest with freedom. It turns greed into freedom, which is really unique. There are a lot of cryptocurrencies, so don't you think it's a big weakness? Yeah, that's the point. There's a million different tokens, and it's hard to differentiate them, and most of them are scams. Why are Bitcoin prices fluctuating? Yes, this is a good question. Because the supply is predetermined and fixed, and the demand goes up and down. So you can expect Bitcoin price to just be like roller coastering for many decades, probably. I mean, it's possible that in the far future it'll stabilize in some way and around some sort of base rate of productivity or God knows what, but we don't know. For now, anyone who gives you a price prediction of Bitcoin, don't trust them. Like, you just can't. You just don't know. You don't know what the future holds. It's all about demand. The supply is just totally predictable, and the demand goes up and down. So the prices fluctuate because demand fluctuates. I think, over time, obviously, unless governments can promise to stop censoring and inflating, the demand for Bitcoin is going to go up, which is why the price is going to go up. So if governments all of a sudden manage to never inflate or censor again, then I think Bitcoin wouldn't be worth that much. There wouldn't be that much demand for it. But since every single government is censoring and inflating, I think it's going to be more valuable in the future. How can we be more involved with students' liberty instead of just being an audience? Well, I mean, look, your executives have baked Bitcoin into your organization. They're providing a lot of educational opportunities. I would pay that forward. I mean, try to spread some Bitcoin education and knowledge in your communities, in your areas. I'll just do a couple more. The most libertarian thing is Bitcoin. Well, maybe, but I think Bitcoin's a mirror. It's kind of whatever you want it to be. I mean, I've met communists who like Bitcoin. I've met Marxists who like Bitcoin, progressives, national conservatives, populists. I mean, whatever. I mean, it's sort of like email. It's like, you're going to use email because you're not going to mail somebody a letter if you want to invite them to a party tonight. Okay. This is like Bitcoin. Like, you're going to use it because it's better than fiat currency for a whole variety of things. You're not going to stop and think about, is email libertarian? Who cares? You're just going to use it because it's better. So I think the politics of it are a little silly. Let's see. We'll do two more. Okay, I got what is the strategic pivot on Bitcoin China and the US are talking about? Who knows? I mean, I think that you are in a game right now of governments, being worried about their own currencies and not wanting people to escape. And that's a very big concern for the Chinese government right now. Like, they have capital controls. They don't want people getting out. It's one of the reasons they don't like Bitcoin. I find it highly unlikely they're going to come out tomorrow and be like, yeah, everybody should use Bitcoin. Not going to happen. Because that would absolutely cripple their ability to stabilize the price in any way of the RMB. The dollar's different. I mean, I continue to think, and maybe we'll end with this, Wolf, but like, I'm very bullish on America in the future in a Bitcoin world. I think, America's values are free speech, property rights, open capital markets in its DNA on its good days. And that's what Bitcoin is. And dictators are the opposite. They need censorship, closed capital markets, and confiscation. And you can't do that with Bitcoin. So there may be some dictators that try to use Bitcoin in some way to subvert, or, like Bukele does. He uses it as a sort of a marketing thing. It might be an anomaly, but I guarantee you that if ever come to the point where like Bitcoin was preventing him from having control over that country, he would turn his back on it immediately.
For sure.
Like, it's all about for him. It's all about control for these people. So you might see some governments like use it to subvert the U.S. Sanction regime. You might see some governments claim that it's going to be, they're going to be, some dictatorship in the Gulf is going to be pro Bitcoin. I mean, this is all a temporary game, but long term, no authoritarian is going to want the population to use Bitcoin in a widespread way, because it kills their machine. It kills their ability to control people. Bitcoin's freedom. So thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom with the audience. And we had like people, trickling in from all kinds of different, websites and social media. So it has been a good audience and an exciting discussion. And so if you want to learn more about Alex Gladstein, as you should, follow him on Twitter. Just type in Alex Gladstein, you'll find him there. Also look at the work of the Human Rights Foundation, HIF.org. They're doing a lot of great work on human rights and also on Bitcoin if you want to learn more. You want to plug something else, Alex?
Well, yeah, I think you should follow me on Nostr. I think there's a chance that what Bitcoin has done for money, Nostr will do for communications. So I don't know if I can enter the main chat, Wolf, but I'm going to put this in the private chat. This is what's called my NPub. Maybe you can share that with people, Wolf.
Yeah,
is that
Brian
possible? Okay, great. So Brian will share it. So if you go to an app like Primal, for example, which works on iPhone or Android or your computer, or Coracle or Damus, there's a million different clients for Nostr. Nostr is a protocol like email, but for communication. And it's highly censorship resistant and decentralized. And you own your own data. Like you create your identity, public, private key, you write down your password. If you don't like what a participant is doing, like for example, the analogy would be Gmail or Facebook or Twitter, you can just move your data somewhere else. You can move your preferences and picture and all your posts to a different client. It's a totally different way of thinking about the internet. And it's got Bitcoin baked into it as the payment layer. It's amazing. So follow me on Nostr is really like you to follow me. And I try to make a post there at least every day. And it's different from what I would post on something like X or Twitter. So
Excellent.
Anyway, follow me on Nostr.
And check out the Human Rights Foundation. And besides that, go to studentsforliberty.org if you're interested in becoming part of our volunteer force worldwide. We are in over 107 countries. If you don't have your country, we will also empower you to start Students for Liberty there. Talk about Bitcoin, talk about freedom, whatever you would like to share with the world. We will help you and give you training and resources. And besides that, if you happen to be in the United States in February next year, check out libertycon.com. The tickets are out there now. You can come to the conference. We're expecting 1,000 people, students from around the world, supporters of the Liberty movement internationally will be there. It's going to be exciting. And let's say one more time, thank you to Alex Gladstein, and I hope to all of you see you soon.